Thank you for joining us for the Building State and VOAD Capacities to Protect Children in Disasters webinar, focusing on the preliminary social network analysis results. My name is Erin King, and I serve as the U.S. Community Preparedness Manager for Save the Children. I'm joined today by our incredible partners from the Natural Hazard Center at the University of Colorado Boulder, Jamie Vickery and Mason Matthews. Katie Murphy is also supporting by providing technical support for this webinar. Thank you, Katie. We hope that this webinar serves as a catalyst to increasing participation in the social network analysis, which is a key component of this project. Before we get started, I'd like to point out that this webinar is being recorded for sharing purposes. If you are joining us live, please use the Q&A feature or chat feature to share your questions about the information presented or the project overall. If time permits, we will do our best to answer your questions live at the end of the webinar, or we will follow up with you directly. Please include a phone number or email address whenever you type a question into the Q&A box or the chat feature. If you are watching the recording, please send any questions to us via email. Our emails will be provided on the final slide of the presentation. Before we go into the social network analysis, for anyone that's not familiar with the pilot project, here's a brief overview. Save the Children has been protecting children for more than 100 years. Our primary mission is to provide children a healthy start in life, the opportunity to learn, and protection from harm. The Building Capacities project is based on lessons learned within our disaster response, recovery, and resilience programming. It is a 3-year project that began at the fall of 2017 and will conclude in 2020. Our primary partnerships within this project are members of the Arkansas Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster, Nebraska Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster, emergency management officials, and child serving institutions. All components of this project, including the social network analysis, will be used in a variety of ways, primarily to enhance the integration of support for children within VOAD and emergency management structures. However, much of the information we need to better understand how to best integrate resources for children within each state can also serve as a tool to help us collectively learn as a part of the VOAD movement how to create a resilient disaster infrastructure within each state in a larger context. In the photo on the right, training participants in Nebraska created a physical web of resources by passing a streamer from person to person as they shared resources. In a similar fashion, the social network analysis will help us create a photo of resources created by data. And as a collective body of VOAD, we will be better positioned to understand how we work together and identify ways in which we may improve. It is important to note that participating in the social network analysis survey will not result in any negative representation of your organization. We value each and every one of our partners in this work. As mentioned before, if you have questions throughout the presentation, please use the Q&A feature or chat feature. And now, I'm pleased to introduce you to Jamie Vickery from the Natural Hazard Center.
Hello, and thank you all so much for participating in today's webinar. We are thrilled to share preliminary results with you all from the Social Network Analysis Survey. As Erin mentioned, my name is Jamie Vickery, and I'm a research associate at the Natural Hazard Center at the University of Colorado Boulder. Presenting with me today is my colleague, Mason Matthews, who is a postdoctoral research associate at the Natural Hazard Center. I will be providing a brief overview of the evaluation component of the Building Capacities project, which many of you may be well familiar with. The main purpose of this work is to measurably increase the capacity of state VOADs and emergency management agencies in Arkansas and Nebraska to protect children in disasters by increasing representation and prioritization of children's needs, developing necessary tools and protocols, and lastly, to build training and response capacities through collaboration, ultimately producing a proof of concept for a state-based model that can be replicated nationally. The team at the Natural Hazard Center is leading the evaluation component of this larger project. The team includes myself, Mason, and Lori Peak, who is the principal investigator for this project and the director of the Natural Hazard Center. She unfortunately could not join us today since she is traveling. Here we have listed the project-related activities that the Hazard Center team has led with the help of Save the Children, including baseline surveys of Arkansas and Nebraska VOAD member and partner organizations, This was conducted in December 2018 and was designed to gain a baseline understanding of organizations' knowledge, readiness, and capacity as it relates to children's needs during disaster. Building on this initial survey, we will eventually conduct an inline survey to assess change over time with regard to these areas. This will be done in fall of 2020. With Mason's leadership, we have been building GIS maps for Arkansas and Nebraska VOADs, which include layers such as child serving organizations, FEMA disaster declarations, and emergency coordinator contacts. This is an ongoing activity for the project. Fourth, members of the Natural Hazards Center team conducted an asset mapping activity in December of 2018 in both Arkansas and Nebraska, which some of you may have also participated in. The topic for today's webinar, the social network analysis, is ongoing as we attempt to achieve higher response rates in each state. Mason will be describing this in more detail in upcoming slides. Finally, our role in the project is that of a thought partner with Save the Children, Arkansas and Nebraska VOADs, and partner organizations as we share ideas and engage in discussions to identify solutions and points of collaboration for enhancing resilience and addressing children's needs during disaster. The objectives of this webinar are to, first, present preliminary findings from the social network analysis in both states. Second, Mason will briefly discuss upcoming analyses that he plans to do for the social network analysis. And finally, he will discuss ways the survey information can be useful for Arkansas and Nebraska VOADs. Before moving into Mason's portion of the presentation, we wanted to point out the number of completed surveys for each state and express our gratitude to those of you who have taken the time to complete this. As of right now, 20 out of 47 surveys have been completed in Arkansas, and 36 out of 51 surveys have been completed in Nebraska. Thank you all so much for your time and effort in completing these. And if you have not had a chance to complete the survey, there's still time. Please let us or Aaron know if you need the survey link resent to you. Mason will pick up the presentation from here.
Thank you, Jamie and Aaron, for that wonderful introduction. And I'd like to thank all of you who completed the survey. We're very excited by the preliminary results, and we're excited to share some of those with you today. So I'd like to just start with a quick review of what social network analysis is. A network consists of actors and the relationships between them. And those actors can be a variety of different things. They can be people, they can be countries, they can be organizations, they can be many different types of things. And the relations between the actors can also consist of many different types of things. And this table kind of summarizes some of the things that people who study social networks look at when they look at the relationships between nodes. Some of them are based on a spatial location. It could be something like membership in the same clubs and events, the attributes that people, organizations, countries share, different types of kinship, a variety of other types of roles. They can look at interactions between the nodes, such as who talks to who gets advice from who. They can also look at flows of information, resources, etc. So as we look at the survey we're conducting with Save the Children and the VOAD organizations, the nodes in this network analysis are the actual VOAD member organizations. And we're looking at different relationships that connect those VOAD member organizations. And from those of you who've taken the survey, the main set of interactions that we're looking at are the 4 C's that all the VOAD member organizations are intimately familiar with: who collaborates with whom, who coordinates with whom, who cooperates with whom, and who communicates with whom. But we're also looking at several other different types of different types of connections between the member organizations, such as if they share the same organization type, if they provide the same types of disaster services, do they use the same communication channels? And then we've also asked questions regarding the flows between those organizations. Who shares information with whom, who borrows equipment from whom, and other types of flows. And these questions are driven by some overarching questions that we're looking at. Primarily, what are the levels of 4C interactions that are occurring between the member organizations? And then what explains why people are interacting at those different levels? Is it because they share attributes? Similar organizations collaborate more than they do with other types of organizations? Or is it because they're engaged in flows of information, flows of resources, etc.? So today we just wanted to look at a couple of preliminary findings, and these are based on those attribute interactions that I was talking about previously. So which communication channels do VOAD member organizations use to share information with regarding their work? Which of those channels are the most used for information sharing, and how much overlap is there between organizations based on the different channels that they use? So this first bar chart is from preliminary results from the Arkansas VOAD member organizations. This is from the first 20 surveys that we received. And in question 8 of the survey, we asked about 10 different communication channels. And hopefully you can read those. The text is kind of small, but we asked about email, social media, websites, in-person contact, telephone, text message, teleconference, print media, news and newsletters, both electronic and in print. And it was interesting to find out that the member organizations we've received survey from are already using a lot of these different channels to share information about what they do. In fact, they're using on average over half of the communication channels. A couple of the organizations were using all of the channels, and there was no organization that was using less than 4. We did see that the older kind of print-based channels of communication appear to be less used than some of the more digital and actually in-person communication channels. This slide shows a 2-mode network of the organizations and the communication channels that they use. And in this diagram, you can see connections between the organizations, which are colored orange and represented by numbers, and the communication channels, which are colored green and represented by letters. And I've kind of highlighted here some of the preferred communication channels. And then the size of the nodes is based on the number of organizations that use that channel. So you can see here that these, just like in the bar chart, the email, in-person, social media, telephone, and websites were the preferred channels of communication to share information about what the organizations are doing. And then in this slide, we've converted that 2-mode network into a 1-mode network of just the organizations. And in this diagram, there's a connection between 2 organizations if they have a communication channel in common, if they use the same communication channel. And the thicker ties indicate that they have more communication channels in common, so they're using more of the same communication channels. So on average, there's over 5 shared communication channels. Some of the organizations share as many as 9, and the least number of communication channels shared was 1. So all of the organizations we've received surveys from in Arkansas so far are connected in terms of the communication channels that they use. And in the survey, one of the questions we asked was whether or not the organization was currently a member of the VOAD. So we wanted to compare members and non-members. One of the non-member organizations had fewer overlapping channels, and the other had more. So that was, we had 2 results there, but all of the organizations were connected to some degree by the same communication, by using the same communication channels. And I just wanted to clarify that these connections aren't the 4 C's. These connections are just the fact that organizations are using the same communication channel. So today we're not presenting the 4Cs questions, but they are represented in the survey. And I just also wanted to say that all of this could change with more data. This is less than half of the Arkansas VOAD member organization. So as we get more surveys in, this might change. And then the follow-up survey analysis, one of the things that we would like to do is to ask questions such as, if do VOAD organizations who prefer the same communication channels tend to collaborate at the higher levels of the 4Cs than those with fewer in common. So maybe we might expect that these organizations that are sharing 9 communication channels might collaborate more than the organizations that are just sharing 1. So those are the types of questions that we want to understand moving forward. These are the preliminary results from 23 of the organizations in Nebraska that have completed the survey. And we see some similar results here. These are the same 10 channels of communication. And again, in Nebraska, we can see that the average number of communication channels used by the organizations was more than half. And again, we had organizations that are using all 10 of these communication channels to share information about their work. And again, there weren't any organizations that were using fewer than 4 of the channels. Once again, it seemed like the print channel to share information was the least used. And we had a mix here of in-person connections, and then email and social media were also used more to share this type of information. And again, here's the 2-mode network representation of the organizations in Nebraska and the communication channels they use to share information. And again, we've highlighted here the ones that were the most used. And we can see again that that's email, in-person connections, social media, and websites. And again, this is that conversion from the 2-mode network to the 1-mode network, where we can see the connections between organizations based on the communication channels that they have in common. And again, thicker ties mean that they have more communication channels in common. And again, we see a lot of overlap here. On average, the organizations have more than 4 communication channels in common. And in this case, there were some organizations that had as many as 10 communication channels in common and as few as 2. So there's already a lot of overlap in the channels that people use to share information. And again, we compared the member and non-member organizations. In Nebraska, we've received a few more surveys from non-members, so we looked at those again. And again, there were some that had more overlapping channels of communication and some that had fewer, but everybody is connected in the network in terms of sharing at least some communication channels with the other organizations. And again, this is going to change when we have more data. And actually, since I started analyzing the data, it's bounced up to 36. So we're really happy with the responses that we're getting. And we thank you again for completing the survey. And again, as we move forward, we want to do some of these same analyses to see whether or not people who are organizations who share more communication channels might also tend to collaborate more. And then one of the other things that we're interested in doing as we move forward is actually comparing across the different VOADs. So we can look at the patterns of communication across the different states to see how those comparisons might be useful. And this is just kind of a basic example of that. As we look at the 2 states, we can see that so far the top 5 preferences in both states are pretty much the same. They're in slightly different order, but it's email, social media, websites, in-person contact, and telephone. And then again, this kind of the older print media communication channels were less used. So we're hoping that this type of information will also be useful to VOAD member organizations as you move forward with your work. And Aaron brought up some great ways that this might be useful. For example, maybe the federal partners would like to know the preferred communication styles of VOAD member organizations, and might like to know things such as how many organizations prefer email or in-person meetings. Or such things as sharing with organization leaderships, donors, and federal organizations the value of in-person meetings. So it's just probably helpful for our partner organizations, federal government organizations, to understand how VOAD member organizations communicate with one another, and that might be useful to them as they want to share information with the member organizations or engage with them. And it might be also helpful for them to know that many of the resources they prefer are tech-based. But yet the consistent use of technology platforms has been identified as an area of improvement by both VOADs within the project period. And as we move forward, I'm sure there will be other ways that this information can be useful, and we'd love to get any kind of feedback from the member organizations as they complete the survey. And again, we'd really like to thank you for your time that you've already invested in completing the survey. And we would love to encourage you to complete it if you haven't done so already. And we would really look forward to sharing final results with the member organizations also. And we hope that this will actually be useful in understanding how organizations are communicating and engaging in the 4 Cs. So that's the preliminary findings that I have to present today. I don't know if Aaron or Jamie, if you have any other closing remarks.
We have one question in the chat box right now. This is Aaron. So Jerry from Save the Children, who's on my team, asked, does the project prefer or use a particular communication channel? So overall, the project, we've done various methods of engagement throughout the project. So we've done in-person facilitated sessions, we've used webinars, we've also done one-on-one meetings and outreach. And the primary tool for the survey mechanisms that Jamie mentioned earlier, the baseline survey, and for the social network analysis have been email-based, like receiving the invitation via email, but then the ability to complete it online. And we have had individuals reach out to us and say, listen, the connectivity at my house isn't as great as I wish that it was. And I represent this small faith-based organization, and can you meet me in person to help me take the survey? So we're currently meeting with individuals as they need to help them complete the survey just by, sitting there and typing in the responses for them, essentially. So we're using mixed methods of communication, and we have considered the thought of like newsletters or blogs and things like that. It's an idea that's been shared often, but based on the survey feedback, we're not really sure if that's worth our investment or if it's better to have one-on-one in-person meetings while we can, or to mass communicate via email. Another question, is there any existing research to suggest relationships between communication channels and the 4 Cs? For example, that particular communication channel strengthen through collaboration. So currently, not that we're aware of. Jamie, do you want to talk a little bit about the research that you guys did as part of the initial part of the project?
Yeah, well, actually, not to put it back to you, Mason, but you have been so involved in creating the social network analysis and doing background research on the 4 Cs. I first wanted to defer to you because of your expertise in this area.
There has been some different research on interorganizational communication, but so far not that I've seen in the context of VOADs and the 4 Cs. We have followed up on some previous research that's been done, social network analysis, but it was created using FEMA situation reports and archival news reports, and they use that to determine the connections between VOAD member organizations. So there's a lot of aspects of this research that are kind of pioneering in that regard. So I would say there are probably examples from other types of interorganizational network research, but I'm not as aware of those focused specifically on VOAD organizations and the 4Cs.
And to that point, whenever we began the design of this survey over a year ago, we started to look at what the mechanisms were that we really wanted to understand. And so with that, we went back to the state VOADs, and the state VOADs both participated in defining what the 4Cs meant to them, and also defining what the overall value of VOAD is. And so those facilitated sessions were strategically used to design the survey so that we could create a common understanding and common definition of the 4Cs as it's used within each state VOAD. So that has informed, and this whole project has been totally informed by the state VOAD. So thank you to everyone who has provided feedback or participated in those focus sessions or facilitated sessions. And we look forward to presenting additional data after the first of the year. We will be compiling data. We're closing the survey on December 10th. So if you haven't had the chance to complete your survey for the organization yet, you will be receiving a follow-up email from me within the next 24 hours with the direct link to support you in taking that social network analysis survey. So we ask that you please complete your surveys by December 10th. And then we will also have a webinar delivered after the first of the year, later in 2020, probably within the first quarter, around all of this data and what we've learned from it and how we'll be incorporating it within the rest of the project, as well as how it might inform other work that we're all doing. So we look forward to having that available to you in 2020. And if you have any questions, please feel free to follow up with any of us, Mason Matthews, Jamie Vickery, or myself. We're all available via email and by phone as well. So just give us a call or send us an email and we'll be happy to chat more about this project. If there are no other questions, we would like to conclude today's webinar by again saying thank you to the participants of the survey and for all the work that you've been doing. We know that the Midwest has been significantly impacted this year, and we're very fortunate to have thought partners like the rest of you who are doing incredible work within the field and taking time out of your busy schedules to influence the results of this information and the success of this project. So thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to talking with you more in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for participating, and thanks again for filling out the surveys.